Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for an MP webinar covering 2023 pay transparency laws. I'm Brianna Hostler, Marketing Specialist here at MP. For those of you joining us on a webinar for the first time, MP is a full-service human capital management company. We offer a complete suite of products and services to support organizations through the entire employee lifecycle, including recruiting, HR, payroll, benefits administration, time and attendance, and compliance assistance. We support our clients with cutting edge technical solutions as well as proactive, reliable service and deep HR and payroll expertise. At MP, we are wired for HR and help our clients succeed by aligning their people strategy with their business goals. I'm excited to introduce your presenters for today's program, Amanda Leonardi and Meg Olivastri. Amanda Sherm CP is an HR partner at MP. She currently provides HR support to businesses of all sizes in a variety of industries. She previously managed HR for a human services nonprofit organization. Meg has over a decade of experience in managing the human resources function, working with businesses of all sizes and industries. As a senior HR partner with MPHR, she assists clients with compliance, training, HR guidance, and support for the full employee lifecycle. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started here today. If you would like to submit a question during the program, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. We will be sending out the recording of the webinar later today, along with the slides. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic off to Amanda and Meg.
All right. Thank you, Brianna. And hello, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Meg and I are thrilled to be with you today. So thanks so much for taking some time out of your busy schedules to spend some time with us this afternoon. We are here to talk about the very hot topic of pay transparency. And now that summer is coming to a close, sadly, I'm still in mourning, but the kiddos are back at school and it's post Labor Day. Many businesses are now sitting down and starting to prepare for the end of the year, which is crazy that it's going to be here before we know it. But now is a really, really good time to start thinking about your upcoming HR goals for the next year. And I definitely think it's worthwhile to include pay transparency compliance on that list of goals. So our main mission today is to have you leaving this session understanding why this is important, why you should be paying attention to it, understand some compliance requirements, as well as feel prepared to really implement this at your place of work and for your business. So with that, we are going to dive on in. And my first slide here is our little legal disclaimer. So this training is intended for educational and informational purposes only. We are not attorneys, so please do not construe anything we discuss today as legal advice. But we do hope that you get a lot of good information from an HR best practices perspective that you can walk away and implement in your business today. In terms of an agenda, so we are going to start with an introduction to pay transparency. What does any of this mean and why does it matter? Then we're going to be talking about some legal and compliance considerations for you. And then on the back half of the presentation, we are going to break it down kind of step by step to ensure that you're prepared to comply with these requirements and implement pay transparency in your business. We're going to then segue into some frequently asked questions we've been getting across our client base on this topic. And then last but not least, we will open up the floor to your questions. So as Brianna mentioned, please feel free to submit those questions through the Q&A function. And at the end of today's session, we will mull through those and get your burning questions answered. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner in crime, Meg, to kick us off.
Thanks so much, Amanda. So first, let's chat about what pay transparency even is. So pay transparency refers to the practice of openly sharing information about employee compensation within an organization. Pay transparency laws are going to be unique from state to state, but as a general rule, they typically involve one or both of the following. requiring employers to disclose pay information to job applicants, or requiring employers not to restrict employees from requesting or sharing salary, compensation, and/or benefit information. In some states, like Nevada, companies are required to disclose salary ranges to any applicant they interview. On the other hand, some states only require salary disclosure upon the applicant's request. Some states, like Colorado, also require that all employment benefits offered for the job, including healthcare, retirement, paid days off, are all included. So as you can already tell, the laws are variable and they're changing every day. Today, we're going to give you an overview of these laws and how best to stay compliant. Your MPHR partner can also be a really important resource in helping to revamp your strategy and keep you informed about the ever-changing world of pay transparency. So instead of diving right into the scary requirements and challenges, let's kick things off by discussing some of the benefits of pay transparency. There's increased engagement and retention, it helps promote your fair wage practices, and it's going to improve performance. All things we want to see as leaders in our organizations, right? So first, let's talk about the benefits within retention and attraction. This has been such a significant issue for all companies, spanning over all industries these last few years. I know that when I was in-house, I would have tried anything to improve both of these. When employers communicate how pay is determined, why it's competitive to the market, and how it can be progressed, PayScale noted in its report that improving pair perception can reduce intent to leave by 30%. Transparent pay practices can help attract and retain talented employees. Prospective candidates are more likely to be interested in organizations that prioritize fair and equitable compensation practices. Current employees are also less likely to seek opportunities elsewhere if they perceive fairness in pay decisions. A SHRM study found that 70% of organizations that list pay ranges on job postings say that doing so has led to more people applying to their postings. And nearly 2/3, so 66% of organizations that list pay ranges on job postings say that doing so has increased the quality of applicants they're seeing. So those are some pretty hefty numbers. Pay transparency can also influence applicant behavior. In that same SHRM study, 82% of US workers are more likely to consider applying to a job if the pay range was listed in a job posting. So overall, there's a ton of benefit in providing this upfront. Administratively, it's also one less question you need to focus on in an interview because your applicant already has the answer. Transparency in pay can also build trust between employers and employees. When employees have a really clear understanding of how their pay is determined and believe that the process is fair, they're more likely to feel valued and engaged. This, in turn, can boost morale, productivity, and overall job satisfaction. In the absence of pay transparency, employees can engage in speculation and rumors about pay disparities. This can lead to a really toxic work environment and decreased morale. So transparency helps dispel rumors and fosters a more positive workplace culture. From that same SHRM study that I mentioned earlier, 73% of US workers said that they are more likely to trust organizations that provide pay ranges and job postings than ones that do not. While we're all aware that the interview starts from the moment that person views your job ad, now it's more important than ever. Transparent pay practices often require better communication between managers and employees, which is great in so many aspects of the business world. So in turn, this can foster more open and honest conversations about performance, expectations, and career growth, which lead to improved engagement and development opportunities. In a transparent company, employees know exactly why they're paid and what they're paid. This also means that they know how they can move up in the pay scale. So they're likely to put in extra effort to produce higher quality work, improve their metrics, and learn new skills. Transparency also provides employees with a clearer understanding of how their compensation is determined. This understanding can reduce feelings of confusion or frustration about pay and lead to more informed decisions about salary and performance. Pay transparency can make it easier on leaders too, to avoid discriminatory pay practices. You don't mean to do it, none of us do, but with unconscious bias at play, it can happen. And years later, you're doing an audit and you have no idea how you got there. When pay information is visible to employees, there's a greater accountability to ensure that pay decisions are based on merit and not factors like gender, race, or other biases. Now, obviously, everything comes with its own set of challenges. So I thought I'd share just a quick highlight of some of the things that we might be up against when implementing some of these changes. We won't have the solutions for all of these here for you today, but your MPHR partner is very, very knowledgeable in these issues and has experience with these. So feel free to reach out to them with any specific concerns or questions. So the first one, privacy concerns. Sharing individual compensation information is gonna raise privacy concerns among employees. Balancing transparency with individual privacy rights is a challenge that organizations are going to have to address. Salary compression. Transparent pay practices may also lead to salary compression, where employees in similar roles expect equal compensation, regardless of their experience or their performance. So balancing internal equity with external competitiveness can be challenging. And cultural resistance. Implementing pay transparency may face resistance from managers and employees who are accustomed to more secretive or traditional pay practices. Overcoming that resistance and cultural barriers requires really effective change management and lots of communication. Misinterpretation and discontent. So transparent pay practices can also potentially lead to misinterpretation or discontent if employees perceive their compensation is unfair, even if you've done everything right and the process is equitable. So addressing employee concerns and providing very clear explanations become crucial in maintaining trust. In summary, pay transparency promotes fairness, trust, and equality in organizations. While it does offer numerous benefits, it is going to present challenges that need to be carefully managed. Organizations are increasingly recognizing the importance of pay transparency in addressing pay disparities and meeting employee expectations in an ever-changing landscape. Okay, so let's dive into some of the legal stuff. Pay transparency initiatives have to comply with various laws and regulations to ensure fairness, prevent discrimination, and maintain legal compliance. As states continue to pass new legislation, pay transparency is going to become even more critical. It applies to not only the state where you're headquartered in, but may also apply to where your remote employees sit, and even where they apply, or even view your job posting from. This list here provides an overview of states with pay transparency laws already in effect, and it's updating very quickly. So just to discuss a few, California and Washington, employers with 15 or more employees located anywhere must disclose the wage scale or salary range and a general description of all benefits and other compensation in the initial job posting. In Colorado, employers with at least one employee in the state must include the hourly rate, salary compensation, or a compensation range offered for the job in every job and promotional posting, as well as a general description of bonuses, commissions, other compensation offered for the job, and employment benefits offered for the job, including healthcare, retirement, sick leave, parental leave, vacation, and any other benefit that has to be reported for federal tax purposes. So, as you can see, the laws are similar, but will have differences to them that need to be paid attention to. So I spoke about pay scale in the previous slide, and it's one of the main highlights of most pay transparency laws. Pay scale is defined as the salary or hourly wage range that the employer reasonably expects to pay for the position. Later on in this presentation, we're going to discuss the steps to best determine your pay scales. But for now, this is a list of states and localities that have adopted laws that require providing applicants or employees the pay scale for a role, either on the job posting, during employment, or upon request. So what is considered a job posting or advertisement. As you can see, I put a few examples up here. Each state has a similar, but some, slightly differentiation of what a job posting means to them. Some include third parties, some don't. It will be extremely important that you read through the regulations with a fine-tooth comb to understand all of the nuances that they bring. So, a really hot topic over the last few years when recruiting for remote positions available to out-of-state applicants, which again, we're all very familiar with, especially with the change in work culture over the last few years. You will also need to comply with all states where your posting is listed, because some states, like Colorado, require remote positions to include salary information. An employer would need to include the salary range in the event that it receives applicants from this state. Bottom line, HR best practice is to disclose salary ranges in all remote job postings unless you have very specific location requirements in a state that does not have any pay transparency laws. So as I mentioned, that list of states with pay transparency laws is growing and fast. Here is a list of states that have recently introduced pay transparency laws, and certainly something to keep in mind as you're planning for this coming year. Your MPHR partner will be able to give you more information about the ins and outs of what each of these new states being added to the list are going to require. And none of them are, only a handful of them are going to be the same. So it's really important that we're diving in deep to what each of these are going to be requiring. So here are some of the other legal considerations that I thought would be helpful to just touch upon and put on your radar as you're looking into your pay transparency practices. The first is the regulatory environment, which we've been talking about over these last few slides. Governments are implementing or considering laws related to pay equity and transparency. From what we've seen with our clients, organizations are proactively adopting pay transparency measures to comply with the upcoming legal requirements and to avoid potential legal risks. The gender pay gap and concerns about pay inequity have certainly gained significant attention in recent years. Pay transparency is seen as a means to address and eliminate pay disparities based on gender and other protected characteristics. Your MPHR partner can help you with a pay gap audit and look at any pay disparities that may have developed over the years. Equal pay laws. Many jurisdictions have enacted equal pay laws that aim to eliminate pay disparities based on gender, race, and other protected characteristics. These laws require employers to provide equal pay for equal work or work of comparable value. Organizations need to ensure that their pay practices are non-discriminatory and meet the requirements of equal pay legislation in their jurisdiction. Some other things to consider, but we won't dive into today, are anti-discrimination laws, reporting and disclosure requirements, and privacy laws and data protection. I'm a broken record, but it's important to note again that legal requirements and compliance obligations will vary across jurisdictions. So staying up to date with relevant laws, regulations, and any changes in legislation is crucial to maintaining compliance when implementing pay transparency initiatives. So in closing for this part, here are just, the overarching things to consider when reviewing your pay transparency state or jurisdiction laws. When and how does the pay range need to be disclosed? What is the definition of a job posting or advertisement? Do the job posting requirements apply to remote positions? And do I need to describe other compensation and benefits? And now I'll pass it over to my counterpart, Amanda Leonardi.
All right, thank you, Meg. So now that Meg has told us all about why this is important to pay attention to and consider, you are probably asking yourself, where on earth do I even start with this? Well, have no fear, MP is here. We got you. So I'm going to be taking you through step by step and really highlight the process you should be following to build out your compensation strategy in order to ensure compliance and position yourself as an employer of choice. So the first piece of this is building a compensation strategy. So this is going to be really critical. You certainly do not want to approach this from the standpoint of, well, okay, I'm just going to pick some arbitrary pay range and just quickly get in compliance, and I'm not really going to think through, much more than that. If this is the approach that you take, you're likely going to be facing a whole lot of those challenges that Meg outlined earlier. So this really needs to be a strategic process. And we've broken it down into 5 steps for you to follow. So step 1 is to gather background information. Step 2 is to conduct market data analysis. Step 3 is to develop the pay structure. Step 4, implement and evaluate your new pay structure. And step 5, the grand finale, is to ensure pay transparency compliance. So we're going to dive a bit deeper into each one of these now. So again, starting off with gathering some background information needed for your project's success. So first, you want to define what you want your compensation strategy to look like. And a compensation strategy really explains the why behind employee pay and creates a framework for consistency. Your compensation strategy is going to be based upon many factors, including things like, of course, the company's financial position, other things like the size of the organization, your industry, your business objectives, what's competitive in the market, as well as things like level of difficulty in finding qualified talent, and or any other unique circumstances of the business. Those are all things that you should be taking into consideration as you're thinking about what you want your compensation strategy to look like. And a well-designed comp strategy really supports the organization's strategic plans and initiatives. It's tied to, your company's mission, competitive outlook, and operating objectives as well. So again, you want to take you want to take a bird's eye view and think holistically when you're setting this structure for yourself. An example to kind of tie this all together and make it make sense is, let's say you are a high-tech organization, and your main goal in your main recruitment kind of goal and strategy is to attract and retain the top professional and managerial talent in the industry. In this case, if this is where you are at, you might want to consider adopting a pay philosophy and strategy of leading the market more with your total cash compensation package, or paying higher than other organizations in the industry to really help you meet those recruitment and retention goals that you have. In another example, so let's say you are, in the warehouse or distribution retail industry, and you're located in an area that has, you have low employee turnover, and demographically you're in kind of a contained community with a large labor pool. If this is the case, you might very well have a different philosophy, and you might adopt a strategy of offering compensation and total rewards package that is valued a little less than competitors in a similar organization located 50 miles away in a highly competitive community with labor shortages and high employee demand issues. So, in this scenario, you might adopt a strategy matching kind of the supply and demand of your business, and for your own community, and set the policy to control cost a little bit more. So you just have to take your particular situation and circumstances into consideration and decide the right strategy based upon your individualized business needs. Okay, so kind of keep in mind, as you are thinking about your compensation strategy, this is really going to impact several areas. So, attracting employees, how you're able to attract employees, which is so important to Meg's point earlier, how you're able to retain employees, which is equally, if not more important than, the attraction piece, how you're going to motivate your employees. Obviously, ensure that you are complying and abiding by workplace equity. aligning compensation with organizational objectives, and following legal requirements. So these are all pretty important factors in your business. So you certainly want to spend some time putting thought into this. So as you gear up to define your strategy, some questions to ask yourself in preparation. Who needs to be involved? You want to make sure that you're involving all of the right players. You have, different perspectives, sitting at the table and helping you make these decisions. How does the compensation strategy align with organizational strategy? You want to make sure that there is a story there and those things are aligned. How does the compensation strategy align with our human capital needs? What are your human capital needs? What are those going to be this year, next year, and beyond? And, you want to make sure that you're aligning your strategy to support those needs. How do we want to attract to our business? And will this strategy retain key talent and reward high performing employees? So those are all different questions that you want to ask yourself as you're starting to think about and spin your wheels on what this strategy is ultimately going to look like. So you will also need some additional information on hand in preparation to reevaluate your strategy. And the needed information includes things like job descriptions and current job descriptions. So your JDs provide essential information for comparing an organization's positions with external survey positions. So in order to benchmark your roles, you have to have your job descriptions readily available. So if your managers or HR have updated job descriptions within the last year, you'll probably be already in pretty good shape, maybe just a few tweaks here and there. But if managers have not updated their job descriptions in several years, or if no description exists, the updates should occur first and foremost to really ensure an accurate market comparison. And this step can certainly take some time to fully complete. Though you might have to discuss with your managers, and in some cases, you might have to have conversations with incumbents of the role if you don't already have up-to-date job descriptions for those positions. And if you've attended one of our webinars before, you've certainly heard us talk about job descriptions really being the backbone of HR. So it is a very good idea to make sure that those are updated anyway. So pay transparency is just one of the many reasons why you want to be diligent about keeping your job descriptions up to date. Some additional information that might be helpful is your understanding what the pros and cons are of your current compensation program. So examining the organization's formal and informal compensation history, will give you some helpful information and reveal what has worked well in the past and in turn should be maintained in this new kind of compensation system and strategy. And on the other side of the coin, what hasn't worked so well and what should you maybe make modifications to and ultimately avoid as you put this new quote unquote program into place. And then last but not least, it's going to be really critical for you to have employee census information. So you'll want to pull a current employee census, and we'll talk more about kind of why in the subsequent steps, but you want to make sure that that census has information on employee work locations, a snapshot of how many employees are within each role, any information you have on employee gender, race, ethnicity, or age, employees' length of service, as well as their years of experience, if at all possible, and you have that information on hand. All right, so after you've gathered and reviewed that information, step 2 is to conduct a market data analysis. When you are running market data, there is something called a scope that you want to ensure is applied to the benchmarking. So compensation varies by factors like geographic location, industry, organizational revenue, and company size. So you want to make sure that you're generating data that takes these factors into consideration to really ensure you're getting accurate numbers. So for example, a CFO of a 50 employee company who they have a company revenue of, let's say, $1 million, and they're located in the state of Georgia. will not command the same salary as a CFO of a company that has 1,000 employees with an $100 million revenue in the city of Boston. So the scope and level of responsibilities is different when companies are at varying degrees of sizes, and it also plays into the revenue and geographic location of the company. So when you're running that that benchmarking, you really want to take those factors into consideration. So now you've determined your scope, it's time to benchmark the positions. Now, you'll likely need either to work with a third-party provider that has access to a robust compensation benchmarking tool, or invest in a tool of your own in order to really do this process justice. For those of you who are MP HR services clients, your HR partner can certainly assist you with benchmarking your roles. So we utilize a really great tool to ensure our clients have access to accurate and reliable data, which ultimately helps you make informed decisions. So don't hesitate to reach out to your HR partner, and we can certainly take that off of your plate. But once you have that benchmarking data, there are some things to keep in mind as you're analyzing it. First is always compare job descriptions, never just job titles alone. So, for example, you may have a director or VP title on a role, but when you really look at that job description, the level of responsibility that that person actually has more so falls into kind of a manager title based upon the descriptions of the role that you're benchmarking against. So this certainly doesn't mean that you need to rip away the director or VP title, like, based upon the makeup of your organization. This certainly could be a perfectly appropriate title, but it's just important to note that when searching a job in a compensation tool, you have to understand that the job description is what matters, and really read that to ensure that the job descriptions align, and it's not necessarily the job titles that will align. The role of an office manager is a great example of this too, right? So some companies, their office managers kind of run the show. And other organizations, an office manager's role might be more on the kind of administrative side. They're ordering lunches and supplies for the office, things of that nature. But I have certainly worked with plenty of office managers who are making decisions, on behalf of the company, and really take on more responsibility within the organization. So that's just a great example of the importance of looking at what the duties are and looking at that job description itself, and not just relying on those job titles to benchmark against. And then you also want to focus on trying to find an 80% match. So depending on how unique your roles are, it might be, challenging to find an 100% match, but you certainly want to find something as close to that as possible to ensure that you're using relevant data, and again, have the information that you need in order to make informed decisions and understand kind of where the market lies. From there, you want to compare your current pay rates against the market data that you pulled. So, cross-compare what is competitive in the market with what you're currently paying your employees, and identify if there are any gaps or disparities that exist across your current pay structure. As Meg alluded to earlier, you also will need to take a look at pay equity. So there are certain factors that allow for some differentiation within a pay range for the same or substantially similar roles. And states with pay equity laws have varying definitions of what those factors can be. So that's just an important call out. Like, you definitely want to check into what your state laws are. But generally, there is some wiggle room when it comes to factors like length of service, geographic location, level of education, years of experience, things like performance, along those lines. But again, check into your state specifics. But if you're looking at your pay structure and you're identifying that there are those gaps, it's really important to analyze why those gaps are there, and if seniority, experience, or geography, et cetera, are not at play, you may have some pay equity issues, and you want to pinpoint the reasons why pay inequity exists and assure that you're addressing that as you're adjusting your salary structures and implementing this new compensation strategy. All right, so now that you have some data to make an informed decision, it is now time to develop your pay structures for each of your roles. Meg talked about pay ranges earlier, and many of the state-specific laws that are coming down the pike and already in effect require those pay ranges, right? So the key to really complying with these pay transparency requirements is to establish pay ranges for your role. And a pay range is a range that spans between the minimum and maximum salary limits. It establishes a minimum, midpoint, and maximum for a role. Your range also cannot be left open-ended. So we've gotten some questions, well, in order to comply with this, can I just put that this role, makes up to $100,000 or makes $60,000 and up? You can't. You have to make sure that you're establishing that range. And not only from a compliance perspective, but it's just helpful for you as you are looking at your compensation and making those decisions as you're giving people increases, and you're making sure that you're remaining competitive with your compensation practices. It's really incredibly helpful to have those pay ranges established. One thing that I worked on implementing at my last job that I really saw the benefit of this in was we would have employees come to us all the time and, say, I want to make more money. And we had advertised these pay ranges, right? So for, a direct support position, this is the pay range for that role. The next role would be an assistant manager position, and this is the pay range for that role. The role after that would be a management position, and this is the pay range, so on and so forth. And it helped us, as we had employees kind of asking for more money, it helped us address those questions to say, all right, well, you are at the top of the range for this position now, but if you're looking to earn a little bit more money, we do have this assistant management position as kind of the next step in the process. And in order to be qualified for that role, here are the skills and qualifications that are necessary, right? So it really helped us engage with the employee, and people who didn't want to put in do what it took to kind of take their performance to the next level and grow within the organization. It helped us kind of frame the conversation in that way a little bit, but also encouraged and inspired employees to pursue these additional roles and get promoted from within, and just provided transparency. So I saw it firsthand how it can really be of benefit. And this was before even any of the pay transparency laws went into effect. Pay ranges are also used to manage pay relative to performance and experience in a job. It sets those expectations with employees of what they should reasonably expect to be paid within their specific job. And it also establishes what you reasonably and in good faith expect to pay for the position, right? So it keeps you on track as well, so that you're not just, shooting darts in the dark and picking these arbitrary numbers, and now all of a sudden you have some serious pay equity issues. So it keeps you honest in that process as well, and creates a method to the madness. One thing to note as well is oftentimes employers consider their midpoint of a salary range to be somewhere between the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile on those benchmarking reports. So as you're reviewing the market data, definitely take a look at those percentiles. And usually the midpoint of the range would fall between the 25th and 75th percentile. Some employers will use the 50th percentile, if they want to meet the market. And if a company's philosophy is really to lead the market, the salary point will typically be above the 50th percentile for most positions. Okay, so at this stage in the process, you can look at what you are currently paying employees in comparison to the data you have collected and the proposed salary grades and ranges that you've established for your positions. after the salaries for current employees have been kind of placed into those ranges that you just established, some employees will inevitably not be in line with the guidelines and the ranges that you pinpointed. So red circle rates are salaries or wages that are above the maximum rate the organization has established for the position salary range. So if you're saying the salary range is, $60,000 to $80,000, and someone in that same position is making $88,000, that would be an example of a red circle rate. And then green circle rates are salaries below the minimum rate the employer has established for the position salary range. So, obviously that's problematic as well. And a solution to kind of level set with any green circle rates is to provide pay increases up to at least the minimum in the range. So you want to make sure that, if you're establishing this range and someone is below it, then you're giving them a bump up if appropriate. An exception here might be if an employee has, been performing below expectations and you've been having those conversations and there are just consistent performance issues. And in this case, the employer may want to consider requiring successful completion of a performance improvement plan or something along those lines prior to receiving a pay increase. But what's going to be really, really important there is that you are providing ongoing feedback, right? So you don't want to take that approach if you've never had the performance conversation and this is going to come as a complete surprise to the employee, right? Then you're going to have a disgruntled employee and they're going to see what your advertised range is and be like, well, why on earth am I not there? And so you want to get out ahead of that scenario and really make sure that you're addressing the performance issues ahead of time. Okay, so pay equity, and Meg spoke a little bit about this earlier, so I won't go too deep into the weeds here, but when we talk about pay equity, this is fairness of compensation paid by employers to individuals or groups of employees. You must ensure pay disparities don't exist between workers and various demographic groups. So it's really important as you're taking a look at your current salary structure as well as your future salary structure as you're making those adjustments to employees' pay, you have to make sure that there isn't an adverse impact that's happening on various demographic groups. So you want to make sure that you're looking through that lens to ensure that you're paying people in an equitable manner and there isn't disparate impact that's happening to folks who are members of protected classes. Employees rewarded fairly based on performance skills and other job requirements. So, this is obviously something that we strive for. We want to make sure that employees are being rewarded and recognized for their hard work and compensated on a fair basis. And then, as Meg mentioned earlier, there are state and federal pay equity laws at play that you certainly need to comply with. So, again, as you're developing your pay structures, you really want to make sure that you're taking pay equity into consideration and not setting yourself up to have these inequities in your new structure. This doesn't just involve comparing salaries for employees in the same position, but you also have to look across positions and ensure that you're setting equitable pay ranges for substantially similar roles as well. So if you have 2 or 3 positions across the organization that perform substantially similar or comparable work, meaning, roles that require similar skill, effort, responsibility, those types of things, you really want to make sure that the pay ranges that you are establishing for those jobs are equitable in comparison to one another. So it doesn't mean you're just looking at the folks that are working in that same job title. You have to look at your jobs as well. And regardless of whether they're in the same department, other departments, you have to look across the organization and kind of grade your roles and make sure that you are paying and compensating in an equitable manner. All right, so at this point, you've established your pay ranges, you've made sure that they're equitable. Now it is time to implement and evaluate. So when you are looking to implement this, Obviously, you need to determine an effective date. Like, what is going to be the date that this is going to become effective, and make sure that, you know, you're preparing accordingly for that kind of release and the cutting of the ribbon. It's important to determine who will be responsible for what. What players do you need involved? Is it, you know, you need to get your managers involved? Do you need to get HR involved? Do you need to get payroll involved? Like, there are going to be different players across the organization that really need to understand this before that effective date, right? So we have to make sure that everyone is on the same page. Everyone is understanding of what needs to be done, what the expectation is of them, and they're prepared to roll this out. Meg mentioned earlier change management. That is so, so critical. So you really have to be strategic about the ways in which you're going to implement this. And one of the most important piece, in my opinion, is a communication plan. How are you going to communicate this? How are you going to ensure that the managers are equipped with a communication plan, that employees are understanding of what's happening and why it's happening? And you need to provide, no pun intended, transparency into what's going on. From there, you want to continue to evaluate your new pay structure. So, you know, determine how often you're going to look at this. How often will this compensation structure be updated? The best practice is to take a peek at that annually. You know, things change, the market changes, your strategies change throughout the course of time. So you really want to make sure that your compensation strategy is evolving alongside of those things. You don't want to be caught on your heels and wait 4 years to look at this again, and now you are, you know, completely non-competitive in the market. And so you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success there, and you're continuing to kind of establish yourself as an employer of choice, and compensation is certainly one of the many factors that play into that. Okay, so you know, an effective compensation philosophy should really pass the following quality test. So you want to ask yourself these questions as you're evaluating your new pay structure. So is the overall program equitable? Is the overall program defensible and perceived as fair? Is the overall program fiscally sensitive? Are the programs included in the compensation philosophy and policy legally compliant? Can the organization effectively articulate the philosophy, policy, and overall programs? And are the programs the organization offers fair, competitive, and in line with the compensation philosophy and policies? So you want to ask yourself all of these questions to make sure your new pay structure is passing muster. All right, and then the grand finale here, step 5, is to ensure that you're within pay transparency compliance. So kind of going back to those questions that Meg outlined earlier, you certainly want to review your jurisdiction requirements. So anywhere where you have employees, anywhere where you have a work location, you should be, whether that's kind of a physical work location or a remote work location, you need to look into what your jurisdiction requirements are. And, you know, as we talked about earlier, there are more and more of those requirements coming down the pike. So work with your HR partner to really kind of understand what those are. But, you know, what you should be asking yourself and what you should be understanding as part of those jurisdiction requirements is when and how do the pay range does the pay range need to be disclosed? When is the what is the definition of a job posting or advertisement? Do the job posting requirements apply to remote positions? And do I need to describe other compensation and benefits? So you really want to make sure that you have a solid understanding of those factors in order to ensure compliance. All right, some tips and tricks for you. So multi-state employers, pay attention. It's going to be increasingly critical to stay on top of this. So employers with locations in multiple states should really stay up to date on new and pending legislation. Additionally, you want to be mindful of the differences between the laws. Again, what do you have to disclose? At what point in the hiring process do you have to disclose it? And also a consideration is whether you should implement state-specific practices to comply on kind of a state-by-state level, Or another option is to create a nationwide policy to comply with the most restrictive laws for jurisdictions in which you operate. So if if it's going to be too much to stay on top of each one of the states that you're in, if you're, let's say you're in 30 different states, that's a beast, right? So what you might want to consider is taking a more universal approach, understanding what the most restrictive law is and complying with that to ensure that you're in line with the compliance requirements across the board. But again, you certainly want to make yourself familiar with each and every one of those for each state that you're in. Also, don't try to dodge the laws. So even as the majority of US locations right now don't have pay transparency laws, avoiding the places that do isn't the answer. A great example of this is a number of companies have, attempted to exclude Colorado when hiring remote employees. And, they're doing this in order to avoid that state's pay transparency laws. And this backfired because it sparked an uproar and it eventually led to the development of a public database called Colorado Excluded that exposes these types of companies that are doing that. So, you can't dodge it. No matter which way you slice it, you're going to need to start complying. And more states are implementing these types of provisions. So, now is the time to start considering this. Not only, again, from a compliance standpoint, but also more and more candidates are looking for this. I spoke with a client a couple of weeks ago who told me that they flat out had a candidate say to them in their interview, I almost didn't apply for this role because you didn't have the salary ranges advertised. So it's something that applicants are certainly looking for. And again, it's important to just take that into consideration as part of your recruitment strategy. Another tip is to prioritize the jobs that are likely to be posted in relevant states in Q1 and Q2. Going through these steps, we totally recognize this is a big undertaking, right? There's no doubt about that. And if there is compliance risk at play, it's good to think about just how you're going to prioritize this. What are the most time-sensitive roles that you need to get into compliance? So, determining what jobs you are, frequently hiring for, or pulling a list of where you might be hiring in at the end of this year to in the first couple quarters of 2024, and really prioritizing these positions. Also, training is a big one. So employers should train HR staff, your managers, and others who are interviewing applicants to make sure that they are aware of and also complying with these laws, particularly in those jurisdictions where employees are required to disclose pay upon an applicant's request. They might get peppered with these types of questions, so they should certainly be prepared with how to answer those. And then you also want to prepare your managers for questions. So, a big consideration in all of this is thinking about the impact that this law will have on your culture in relation to transparency. So, change management and communication is key. So, employees you want to make sure that they know and understand how salary ranges are set and how their compensation is determined. Also, employees will quickly note how their salaries compare to the advertised ranges and ask questions. So managers should be ready to help employees interpret and discuss the ranges that are shared and be prepared to explain why employees are positioned where they are in those ranges. And then last but not least, kind of the consideration of discrimination claims. So, along with the rise of pay transparency laws, it's likely that employers may see an increase in discrimination litigation based upon inequitable pay. So maintaining consistency is the best way to combat this and really mitigate your risk. And in addition, you as the employer should really be proactive and consider implementing routine audits into your pay practices and compensation structures to identify these potential areas of inequity and work to rectify them, instead of discovering them for the first time, in a lawsuit or when you're having to defend yourself. All right, and I know we're coming up on time here, so we are going to run through some of these frequently asked questions. All right, we have our first one here.
Yeah, so the first question, can I have a broad national range that encompasses different geographic differentials?
So for a physical location, probably not. The requirement is that you post the range that you reasonably expect to pay for the position, so that so you really need to post that reasonable range. However, let's say you're posting for a remote position and you aren't sure where it's going to be performed, because it could reasonably be performed anywhere in the country. It could be in Colorado. You may have a bit more wiggle room there, but if you have pay differentials based upon geography, you may want to consider adding that in the posting or advertisement as a disclaimer, and also advertise those things. All right, Meg, can I offer a salary above or below the posted range?
So keep in mind that these pay ranges are established in good faith based upon what you reasonably believe you might pay. So I'd say there is some wiggle room, certainly if you're going to be paying someone above the range. Below the range might be a bit more of a challenge and certainly could cause you to have a dissatisfied employee on your hands. So I'd be careful with that one.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I only have one employee in the jurisdiction. Do I have to disclose pay information?
So if I had a nickel for every time as an HR professional, the phrase "it depends" came out of my mouth, and this is one of those circumstances. Meg and I would be sitting somewhere tropical right now, sipping on spicy margaritas. So you really have to look at the jurisdiction requirements. Generally for these types of remote positions, if you have one employee in the jurisdiction, that has a requirement, you do have to comply. But again, it depends on what the requirements of your jurisdiction is. So take a look at those. All right, Meg, so is the pay range only required on postings? Do we need to post or provide pay scales to all employees?
So, as we talked about in the beginning part, this is also going to be dependent on the
Nickel.
jurisdiction. Each location has a bit of a nuanced definition around the term job posting, right? So it does not always just mean your Indeed advertisement. So you really want to dig into the requirements for your jurisdiction to ensure compliance. While some states require it solely at time of hire, other states require it to be shared at the time of position transfer, and others require that you provide it upon request. So it really depends. Again, for MPHR services clients, reach out to your HR partner and we can certainly point you in the right direction in terms of what your specific compliance requirements are.
Excellent. All right. And I recognize we're coming up on time here, and we really want to be mindful of your time. I do see some questions that have been submitted through the Q&A. So what we'll do is we'll take these offline. Some of them kind of overlap with some of these FAQs that we went over, but we'll take these offline and get back to you with those answers. And with that, I just want to thank you all for your time and attention today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you and educating you on everything that you need to know when it comes to pay transparency. We look forward to helping those of you who are HR services clients comply with these provisions. So please don't hesitate to reach out to your HR partner, and we're more than happy to talk about it. And with that, I am going to kick the mic back over to Brianna to take us home. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Amanda and Meg. To learn more about MP's full service solutions for 2023 and more, I just dropped a link in the chat that will connect you with an MP team member. You can also visit our website at mp-hr.com for more information. Visit our website to register and to see the full calendar of upcoming events and available resources. We will be sending out a recording of today's webinar with the presentation slides this afternoon. Thanks for joining us and have a terrific day.